All right, back after a weekend and ready to dive into the new week here on the Morning Pitt. I'm Chris Peak from Panther-Lair.com. Excited you could join us here on a Monday morning for a little bit of Pitt sports talk. What's going on in the world of Pitt sports? Of course, it's all about Pitt football as training camp moves into its third week, really its second full week. Figure 2 weeks ago they started practice on Wednesday and practiced through that week. They had all of last week to practice. Now this is their second full week, the third week. But really, the reality is 2 weeks from this Saturday is going to be the opener against Kent State. So however you want to term training camp, whatever you want to say, if it's 3 weeks, 2 weeks, second week, third week, it doesn't matter. We're coming in on 2 weeks away from the opener. Now, there's 5 days until the 2-week mark until the opener. It's only Monday, but the Saturday at the end of this week will be 2 weeks until the opener, which means we're getting closer and closer. Pitt had a scrimmage on Saturday. No, it was not open to the media. No, details are not being released to the press. We've picked up a few things that we put on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com. If you want to check that out and be tuned in for everything, know what's going on, you can do that. Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. But we got a lot to talk about today as we start this third week of camp, this second full week of camp. I'm just going to call it the third week of camp. No, I'm not doing any more of this second full week of camp. This is the third week of camp. As we get it started, we've got a few things to discuss here. Some big things, some big storylines that we're going to be watching this week, some key players that we're going to be keeping an eye on, and everything to know and think about as we start the third week of camp and our coverage here at Panther-Lair.com and on YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So buckle up on a Monday morning. Let's talk 5 players to watch heading into this third week of camp right here on the Morning Pit. YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Yeah, it's Monday. It's the Morning Pit, and this is youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Like I said, I'm Chris Peak from Panther-Lair.com. Glad to be with you today to get this week started with a little bit of Pitt sports talk. You know the deal of what we do here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We put out Pitt video content. Every day we've got something new for you. We get these morning Pitt videos every day of the week. A little bit of Pitt sports talk to start your day. We have our weekly live show that we do every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m., unless there's a good concert in town, and then we move it to a different day. We have our live show that we do every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. We have press conferences. We have practice highlights. We have interviews. We have all kinds of things right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. If you're a Pitt fan, you like Pitt video content, this is the place to be. And if you want to make sure you don't miss any of it, like our video, like this video, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Subscribe button's right down there, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. If you subscribe, you can turn on notifications, and then you'll never miss any of our Pitt video content. And let me tell you, you don't want to miss any of our Pitt video content. So make sure you like and subscribe. We appreciate it. All right, let's talk about some guys who are standing out as we head into the third week of camp. 5 players you're going to need to know, 5 players you want to have in your mind, 5 players that you want to, when you go into work today or you're talking to your Pitt fan friends today or tonight or tomorrow, you want to be able to reference these guys and be like, I've heard good things about these players. And you'll sound like you're the guy who's in the know. So this is the episode to help you sound like you're the guy who's in the know. And one guy you got to go to, one guy I think, if you want to sound like you know who's a player to watch this year, mention Kyle Lewis. Now, I've talked about Kyle Lewis quite a bit. Redshirt sophomore linebacker, outside linebacker from New Jersey. Only played a handful of games late in his freshman season due to injury. Missed some time the following spring due to injury. Played in about, 9 games last year. Played a decent chunk of defensive snaps, but not a ton. This year, he is the man. He's one of the top outside linebackers on this team, maybe the top outside linebacker on this team. I think he's one of the top linebackers on this team and one of the top defensive players on this team. Kyle Lewis is a guy who, when he was in high school, kind of did a lot of everything on football and otherwise. I think he ran track too. But on his football team, he did a lot of everything. He rushed the passer. He dropped into coverage. He played middle linebacker. I mean, he was really all over the field. He was actually committed to Temple, but he was a guy that Pitt always had their eye on. They kind of waited to really sort of push for him until, I think, mid-fall. Got him relatively easily. I think Kyle's got good character, it seems like, from my interactions with him. And so I think it took him a while to decide to make that flip. But once he did, I know the Pitt staff was excited. And I think they felt like they got a real steal. And he was really one of the first of these, well, I shouldn't say the first of these kinds of athletic outside linebackers they've been signing. I mean, in the 2020 class, they brought in Bengali Kamara and Solomon DeShields. Obviously, those guys were Pretty outstanding athletic outside linebacker prospects, former safeties and that kind of guy, former receivers. But they really started on this run 2022, 2023, and now this 2024 class, and even into 2025, the guys that are still recruiting who are going to their senior years of high school, of this run of getting really athletic outside linebackers, of really honing in on a type of player. And they're not all built the same. I mean, Rasheem Biles and Jordan Bass are different body types from what Kyle Lewis is. Braylon Lovelace is too. But they're all very athletic. You know what I mean? They're all guys who either played safety in high school or could have played safety in high school. In the case of Braylon Lovelace, he could have played safety, but he was their best defensive player, so they had to move him into the middle of the defense just because you want your best player around the ball as much as possible. You know, you don't want to just isolate him back there in a safety spot. But they're all guys who could have played safety in high school, all guys who either starred on offense or could have starred on offense if they played both ways, which Lovelace did, Jordan Bass did. I think Kyle Lewis did, I forget exactly. But I mean, all of these guys could have done that kind of thing. It's the type of player. So it's Bass, it's Biles, it's Lovelace. In this year's class, Cameron Lindsay is a great example, I think. I think Jeremiah Marcelin's a good example, although maybe not quite as much as Lindsay. You go back to 22 with Kyle Lewis and even Marquand Pope, who came in that 2022 class but was medically ruled out. I mean, he was a safety in high school. Same sort of deal. I think he's still, at the end of that recruiting cycle, I think Marquand Pope was still listed as a defensive back. That's the kind of athlete he was coming out of high school. And that's the kind of player. And so Lewis is really sort of the forefather of a lot of this stuff, of that sort of approach to linebacker play. And, from the time he got here, the coaching staff was excited about him. They were excited about what they were seeing out of him in training camp. They were excited about what they saw out of him. Anytime he was healthy, basically the consensus was this guy's going to be really good. Well, he's finally healthy, and he's really good. I think you're looking at your starting star linebacker there. Remember, the star linebacker is that position that plays to the wide side of the field. That's where Kyle Lewis is going to line up. And I expect him to be the starter there, and I expect him to play a lot and be, again, one of the best players on this defense. Now, I understand if you've heard me hype up outside linebackers before, very recently, even as recently as last year, and it didn't always work out. But I hear nothing but good things about Kyle Lewis, and I think he's going to be really, really good in this defense. I think he's going to be really, really good this year, and I think the sky's the limit. I think he's got a really bright future, and I think if you want to go to your Pitt fan friends and be like, yo, keep an eye on Kyle Lewis, number 38, outside linebacker. Now, some of the friends you talk to are probably diehards. They're on the Panther-Lair.com message boards all the time, and so they know about Kyle Lewis. But you probably have some Pitt fan friends who are a little bit less, a little more casual, not quite as tuned in as that, and you can drop a little Kyle Lewis knowledge on them, and they'll be like, all right, you tend to know your stuff, man. I'll keep that name in mind. And then the season happens. They're like, no, Kyle Lewis, you told me about him. Get ahead of the curve. Talk to your friends about Kyle Lewis. You can also get ahead of the curve and talk to your friends about Rasheem Biles. Now, I spent all offseason talking about how I thought Lewis would be the starting star linebacker, and I thought Braylon Lovelace would be the starter money linebacker. Now, I still think Lovelace is going to play a lot. I think he's going to be an integral part of this defense. I think he's going to see a ton of snaps. There's going to be a rotation. But Rasheem Biles might be the man there. I think Biles is going to be really, really good. Again, a lot of the things I just said about Kyle Lewis as far as the recruiting type, the linebackers that they go after, the types of players they bring in, and kind of what they've done with the outside linebacker positions over the last couple of years, a lot of what I said about Lewis applies to Biles. Biles is a little bit taller than Lewis. He's filled in his body very nicely over the last year since he got to Pitt. It's a shame he couldn't have been here last January as an early enrolling freshman. I think he might have even played more on defense than he did last year. As it was, he mostly just played on special teams. I think he played like less than 10 snaps on defense all season, according to Pro Football Focus. So he's kind of relegated to special teams where all he did was like block 3 punts. Oh, nothing. Just blocking kicks all over the place. That's the kind of athlete he is. That's the kind of football instincts and IQ he has, that he's able to get through and make those plays. And now he's going to translate that to the defense. And I think it will translate. And I think he'll be really good as a bookend with Lewis or Jordan Bass and in rotation with Braylon Lovelace. I can't say enough about those 4 outside linebackers. I mean, I just think they have a really good 2 deep of outside linebackers with those 4 guys I just mentioned. Kyle Lewis, Rasheem Biles, Braylon Lovelace, and Jordan Bass. Now, they're all young. I mean, Lewis is a redshirt sophomore, so this is his 3rd year of college. The other guys are all sophomores, so they're entering their 2nd year. They've all played some, but not a ton, and not nearly as much as they're going to play this year. And so when you have that kind of youth and inexperience on the field, well, you're going to have some hiccups along the way. And that's going to happen. It might happen early in the season. It might happen in a crucial moment in the Cincinnati game or the West Virginia game. But I think the talent is there. The upside is there that those 4 guys are going to be really good for this defense this year. And I think by midseason they'll be playing well. And certainly by the end of the season, I think they'll be playing really well. And I think it could be the deepest and possibly most talented group of outside linebackers they've had at Pitt under Pat Narduzzi. I can't really remember a time where I looked at the 2 deep at outside linebacker, 4 guys, and I said, yeah, it's as good as this group. 2021, who did they roll out there with outside linebacker? I mean, I think they were Phil Campbell and Cam Bright and Johnny Patrician. I forget if there was one other guy. I just had all the starting lineups from that year open too. And I closed it. I wonder if there's a way to reopen closed tabs. There probably is, but I'm not going to bother with it. I think this group is as deep and talented as any group of outside linebackers we've seen at Pitt over the last 10 years, which is pretty impressive. And I think they're just because they're young, they're just going to keep getting better. And so that's going to be exciting to watch. I really do. I think it will be. I think it's going to be exciting to watch the young defensive tackles on this team. And I said I've got 5 players, even though I held up 10 fingers. I said I've got 5 players, Kyle Lewis being one, Rasheem Biles being another. But then in the course of that, I talked a lot about Braylon Lovelace and Jordan Bass. Well, now I'm not going to pick just one young defensive tackle, but this is something I've talked about quite a bit over the past week and a half, that I think these young defensive tackles, the Isaiah Neal, Sean Fitzsimmons, even though he's a redshirt sophomore, I mean, he's still relatively young. Jasir Whittington, Francis Brew. I think this group of young defensive tackles, recruited guys, to say nothing of Nick James or Anthony Johnson or even Nakai Johnson, who's a little bit on the older side. I'm just talking about these younger guys, Fitzsimmons, Neal, Whittington, Brew. Again, just like I said about the outside linebackers, I can't hear enough good things. It seems like all I hear are good things about those guys. I'm hearing a lot of good things about these young defensive tackles too. I think these guys are going to be really good. I don't know how many of them will be really good this year. I don't know who's going to step up and seize a job this year. I mean, Fitzsimmons, absolutely. Neal, if it's not absolutely, it's 1 percentage point below absolutely. It's more not sure about the freshmen of Whittington and Brew, how much they'll do and how much they'll contribute this year as true freshmen. But I think they'll play. At least one of them, if not both, will probably burn their red shirts. And so even though you've got Jonathan and Johnson and Fitzsimmons and Neal, you've got 4 guys. You've got and Nick James. You've got 5 guys. Who should be out there. I think you'll have at least a 6th defensive tackle who plays every game, or at least more than 4 games, which means Whittington or Brew will have, will be sophomores next year. They'll burn their red shirts. But I just keep hearing good things about these guys. And it's about the freshmen, but it's also about Isaiah Neal, and it's about Sean Fitzsimmons. I think that group, like I said, I've been talking them up for the last week and a half, that it's, I think the future is brighter there than maybe we thought in the offseason. And I haven't really heard anything to push me off that. If anything, I've heard good things about those guys, and I think they're going to be good. I really do. Another guy, again, sort of sigging on defense here again. And I feel like everybody here has been on defense, but I promise I got one guy to watch on offense. One guy, at least for today's conversation. But another guy is Cruz Brookins. For all the hype in the spring, for everything he was doing in the spring that impressed everybody, the coaches and his teammates alike, for all the talk that there was about Cruz Brookins, it has not fell off a hill at all. It hasn't fallen off a cliff. It hasn't slowed down. It hasn't backed off at all in training camp. If anything, it's gotten louder. Cruz Brookins is still blowing guys up. He's making plays. He's adding takeaway stickers every practice. He's all over the place. He's a really, really good player, and he's going to be a really good player for Pitt. It's almost to the point where, like, could there be even more of a position battle there than we thought? I think Donovan McMillan is locked into a starting job. Could Cruz Brookins push Javon McIntyre? Could he push PJ O'Brien for the third safety spot or even one of the starting jobs? I think it's a very realistic possibility. You talk about sky being the limit. I think the sky is the limit for this guy. Cruz Brookins, I think, is going to be really, I think he's a really talented player, and I think he's going to make an impact as a redshirt freshman this year. Fifth guy to watch. And this I have a feeling will become one of the biggest storylines in camp pretty soon. It's Eli Holstein. All right, I wrote on the message boards last night about this, that this is something to start keeping an eye on if we weren't already. But I think this week right here, and if they have another scrimmage on Saturday, that scrimmage are going to be really, really relevant for the quarterback competition. Now, we may go down there tomorrow to the South Side and have our pre-practice interview with Pat Narduzzi, and he may say Nate Yarnell's the number one quarterback, and that's it. There's no more conversation to have, but I don't know about that. That's not necessarily what I'm hearing, and what I'm hearing is Eli Holstein's doing really well. The Alabama transfer is having a good camp. He was maybe a little bit slowed in the spring by some injury, but he's healthy now, and he's pushing. He's pushing Nate Yarnell. He's pushing him for that job, and he's pushing him for playing time. And Nate Yarnell was one of those guys that we sort of penciled in to be, even like as recently as Wednesday night. Jim and I talked about it. We're like, no, we still think Nate Yarnell is going to be the starter. He's still going to start that game. Holstein will play, but it's going to be Nate Yarnell's job. He took him to Charlotte. They took Nate Yarnell to the ACC Media Days. Clearly, he's the guy. I would think so too. And I thought so. But it sure sounds like Eli Holstein's making a real push to not just, push Nate Yarnell to elevate his game, but pushing to try and take the job through his play. I think this next week, plus, if they have a scrimmage on Saturday, and I assume they'll have a second scrimmage. They had their first scrimmage this past Saturday. I think they'll have one more, would be my guess. We'll see what Pat Narduzzi says about that. But I think this week and that scrimmage are going to be huge for those two guys. And I think if Eli Holstein does over the next 6 days what he seems to have done over the last week and a half, could get really, really interesting. And quite frankly, we'll ask questions this week about the quarterbacks. And the longer Pat Narduzzi goes without being sort of explicit about Nate Yarnell, the more I think that door is hanging open. Now, I think Narduzzi likes having the door open. I think Narduzzi likes having an unsettled quarterback competition at this point in training camp. When you're in this third week, you've still got another full week of camp after this and then your week of game prep. I think he likes, at this point in camp, leave it open. Leave as many jobs open as possible. And let guys battle and let guys fight, and particularly at the quarterback position. Like, if you want to be the guy, step up and show us that you're the guy. I think I've said, Nate Yarnell, efficiency, gets the ball to his receivers, protects the football. That stuff is all great. That stuff will win you games. 6 games, 7 games, 8 games. Doing that will win you those games. But at some point, they're going to need the quarterback to take over the game. At some point, they're going to need the quarterback to carry the team. At some point, they're going to need the quarterback to push the ball downfield and make plays to win games. And I'm not saying Nate Yarnell can't do that. And I'm not saying Eli Holstein can. I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it out of either guy. Somebody's going to have to show that they can. And if they show that they can while avoiding turnovers, they're going to be the guy. If you had asked me a week ago, I'd have said, yeah, it's Nate Yarnell. He's going to be the guy. Now, we'll see. Maybe not. I think there's going to be a real competition, and I think this next week is going to go a long way in telling the story of how that competition goes. Not that I think Pat Narduzzi is going to give us daily updates on it, but it's going to be an interesting competition. for sure. All right, we will be chronicling it all right here at Panther-Lair.com. Of course, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com for all of your Pitt training camp coverage. We got a lot of content coming your way today. We'll have more tomorrow, and we'll be back on the practice field back in the South Side for Pitt practice tomorrow morning, so we'll have lots of coverage coming out of there. Everything on Panther-Lair.com with our camp reports, and then, of course, right here at YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com with practice highlights, interviews, press conferences, all of those things. YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Like and subscribe, and that way you won't miss any of our Pitt video content. Thanks so much for tuning in today. I appreciate it. I hope you had a great weekend. Enjoy your Monday. Get your week off to a great start. And we will catch up with you tomorrow for the Morning Pit right here on YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com.